As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
All right, welcome back. This is part 2 of an introduction to concealed carry and basic firearm training. All right, now if you missed the last one, you can go back and watch it, but we covered some of the basics of what is concealed carry, what's a whole ecosystem of training around you, the protector, and then we also looked at how a semi-automatic handgun functions. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition into the super important universal firearm safety rules. Now, before we get into our 4 universal firearm safety rules, I want you to know I'm going to be demonstrating this using an airsoft gun. So this is an airsoft Glock 19. It will fit into a holster just like a real Glock 19. But as you can see with the orange tip and it's cleared, I'm going to be demonstrating a few things that I would never demonstrate with a real firearm because they're examples of when you're not following the rules, and we never break those rules with a real firearm. So I'm going to be using this Glock 19. It's an airsoft. It's cleared. There's no one behind the camera. Everybody's safe. And just want to clear that up before we start. Rule number 1, treat every weapon as if it's loaded and always know the condition of your weapon. We're going to treat every firearm as if it's loaded. And I don't care if you've just dropped the mag and cleared the chamber and double cleared the chamber and inspected it to make sure there's nothing in there. We're going to treat every firearm as if it's loaded. I'm never going to sweep it and aim it at myself or at someone else. And that's going to create a series of redundancy backups that make sure that we're always safe with a firearm, that we're not going to have an accident, and that no one is going to be hurt. Now, the other thing, in addition to treating every firearm as if it's loaded, is we are also going to know the condition of our weapon. And that is, hey, is it fully cleared, right? Is there nothing in the chamber and no magazine, as I can look through and see through here, no magazine loaded? Is there maybe a magazine loaded, but there's nothing in the chamber? Or are there ammo in the mag and one that's live in the chamber? You need to know all those things so you're not making any mistakes with your weapon. So one habit that I've liked to build as I've worked on firearm safety is whenever I'm using a pistol and it's not inside a holster, inside the holster is where everyone else can see, hey, that thing's safe. The trigger's not getting pulled when it's in the holster, right? But if I'm training with somebody or at the range or just where other people are around, I'm just gonna have them all the time with myself, is when I'm finished shooting and I know that it's empty, there's nothing left in the mag, there's nothing left in the chamber, what I like to do is lock it back. The gun can't go off, can't be fired when it's in this slide lock back position. Everyone around can see that it's in this position easily just by glancing at it, and that just helps people know that it's safe. And then if I set it down, I'll set it down like that with the slide lock back. I don't set it down with the slide forward, just so that people can see, hey, the slide's locked back, where it's a safe condition weapon. I'd have to put it forward to be able to fire it, and it's just a little indicator to everyone around me of what condition it's in, which is a good thing. Rule number 2. Do not place your finger on the trigger until the sights are aligned and on target and you've made the decision to fire. As I'm holding this, my trigger finger is high, way up here on the slide. It's nowhere close to this trigger down here. And if I show it to you from the opposite angle, you probably can't even see my finger. You just see these bottom 3 in my thumb. You don't see that top one. I don't let it drift down into here. And this one's pretty simple. If your finger is off the trigger, there's no way you can pull the trigger, there's no way a bullet can be discharged, so you're safe and good to go. But what can happen is instead of keeping my finger way up here off the trigger, if I can start to get tired and start to creep and start to maybe get down here. And what could happen is if I hear something that scares me or I trip on something, I could accidentally have a reaction where I get to here, boom, and goes off. And so that is not what we want, and we never want to let this finger get down into this area. We keep it high up on the slide where that just can't happen. Now the same thing applies when we're starting to press out and get on target and we're getting our sights aligned. Now we don't want to get that trigger finger creeping here while we're doing that. For the same reason, if something disturbs us and it could go off, that is not what we want. And so instead, we're keeping that finger way off until the sights are aligned. Okay, now I'm ready and I can go ahead and pull and take that shot. Rule number 3, do not point the muzzle at anything you do not want to destroy. And there's nothing worse than being at a range or training and somebody's just turning and pointing the gun around, whether it's loaded or unloaded. We never do that. And that's also sometimes called flagging people. And so we don't want to do that to anybody else, but that also includes we don't want to do it to ourselves. Now, my favorite way to avoid doing this is having a holster with my pistol. And when you're finished shooting your pistol, you put it in your holster, and then everybody knows you're safe, and there's no way you can hurt yourself or someone else. Now then, if you don't have a holster, what you can do is you can always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. And so you can point it down at the ground where you're not going to hurt anybody. Unless you're on a second floor of a building and there's people below you, there's a chance it could go through and hurt somebody. But that's the basic idea. You point it down where it's safe. If you were on the second floor, you could keep it pointed even a temple index or up where it's not going to hurt anybody. There's no one above you. And there's several other ways that you can do that that are safe. But that's the basic idea, is you never ever want to point it in the direction of anything you don't want to destroy. Of course, when you're at the range, you can always keep it pointed down range. So if I were at a range and training, whether it's indoors or outdoors, and the safe area to shoot is this way down range, I can keep this pointed down range. Now, one of the problems that I sometimes see when I'm at a public range is someone will be finished shooting and they go maybe to rack the slide back, and as they do it, they turn and they go sideways. And there's people that are right next to them on the line and they're pointing a gun at that person. That's awful. We never ever want to do that, okay? So always keep it pointed in a safe direction. Down range is safe, towards the ground is safe, and up can be safe if there's no second floor above you. So typically you'll keep it down range, but by far my favorite is to put it in a holster, and then everybody knows we're good to go. In this next little section, I'm going to be using a laser bore sighter, where you put this device that can fire a laser down the bore of your gun. Usually you can use it to help sight in an optic and make sure that your sights are aligned for where you want to hit. But I'm going to use this to demonstrate some things. So I'm going to turn this laser on. You guys can probably see the laser as it illuminates me. And we're going to show some mistakes you can make. So not only can you flag other people, you can flag yourself. So for example, I've got this in a holster. And what I want to do when I remove my firearm from my holster is I want to clear my garment. I want to come out of here. Now I'm going to build my grip and I can press out. All right. So you never want to come out of the holster. I'm going to throw this out here so I don't point the gun at myself. Okay. So what you don't want to do, you come out of your holster and cross in front like this. Oh, then my laser end. There we go. I turned off my laser. All right. So you don't want to pull out and have your hand anywhere in front of this gun. As you can see, if I do it from this angle, I come out, I never want this hand in front where I'm flagging my hand. I always want to take the gun out and then come and marry up and make that the meet and greet with my hand. Okay? Same thing, you don't want to flag when you're reholstering. I kind of throw my hips forward and I'm never aiming this directly at myself. I come in, make it safe. Good to go, okay? Same thing if you're on your hip. You kind of throw your hip out and you can point it this way. You don't want it here where now all of a sudden, if my holster's on my hip and I'm coming this way and I'm flagging my foot, I don't want to risk being able to shoot myself in the foot. So I'm going to throw my hip out and holster up like that. There's several other ways you could do that too. You might be, oh cool, I've got my gun. Oh, I need a new mag. And I reach forward to get that mag and I am flagging myself. So never ever do that. Be very careful to always keep that gun pointed down range. If you're grabbing something, never point it at yourself. Don't cross it over your foot, your hand. Don't ever reach in front of it. All right? So you don't want to flag yourself, flag nobody else. Always treat it as if it's loaded. You got your finger off the trigger, you're going to have no safety issues. Anybody who's thinking here, you're realizing I've just said don't point the gun at yourself. But if I'm carrying in my holster, maybe even on the side here, maybe it's pointed at my leg if I've got big quads or something. Here, appendix, it's still kind of pointed at me, even though it's in the holster. What's okay with that is with, the modern guns that have all of our different safeties that we covered. You can go back to the earlier episode if you want to see that. Once you're in your holster, you're safe, you're good. Now, when you're Unholstering, don't point it, at yourself. As you unholster, maybe throw your hips forward and pull out away and then build your grip. Same over here. You don't want to come across your foot, that kind of thing. But when you're in your holster with any good modern firearm, there is no way that gun is going to go off unless it's got some terrible flaws, and avoid those like the plague. But all your major, your Glocks, your Smith & Wesson M&Ps, lots of other good brands, there's no way, those aren't going off in the holster. They can't go off in the holster. So once you're in your holster, you are safe. Rule number 4, be aware of what is in front of, behind, and around your target. You're responsible for every round that leaves your pistol. So even if you're in a defensive shooting, you're being attacked, if you miss and you hit an innocent person, you're gonna live with that for the rest of your life. Even if you miss and it goes through a wall and hits an innocent person behind a wall, that's on you. You're responsible for that. So you have to know what is in front of your target, make sure that everybody's safe, that there's no danger of hitting someone who's coming in front of your target. You know what's beyond your target, so in case you go through your target, that no one is in danger beyond it, and know what's around your target. Now, if you are in some type of defensive situation, you might be able to choose, like if I'm approaching somebody's coming at me that's dangerous, just by positioning yourself, you might be able to position a safer backstop. So be aware of those things. And also be an excellent marksman or markswoman where you can hit your target and there's no danger that someone who is innocent could be injured if you do have to fire. One of the beautiful things about the 4 firearm safety rules is that there's redundancy that's built into them. So for example, for me to have an accident, I would have to break 2 of them, not just 1. So let's say I shot myself in the hand. Number 1, I'd have to break rule number 2, which says never let your trigger finger get down by that trigger unless you've aligned the sights and made the decision to fire. So as long as my finger's off that trigger, and then I'm also not breaking rule number 3, which is never pointed at something that you don't want to destroy, like your hand, I'd have to break 2 of those rules to do that. So that's a beautiful thing about the rules, and as long as you obey them, they will give you that redundancy and keep you safe, prevent you from having any kind of accident. Not only that, but people will really appreciate shooting with you when you obey these rules. There's nothing worse when shooting with someone who is endangering other people, and you gotta leave, you gotta get out of there because it isn't safe. So the first rule of firearm safety is to know your weapon, what condition it's in. So let's say, you're out shooting with some guys and they're like, hey, here's a pistol and it's clear. Well, that's great. It probably is clear, but you don't know 100% until you check it for yourself. And one of the most important things to be able to do to know when you're starting is to know what condition this is in and how to make it safe. So if somebody just hands me a pistol and they're like, hey man, here you go, it's clear. Well, if the mag isn't dropped and the slide isn't locked back and I can't just visually inspect it and see it's clear, I want to know for myself 100% that it's clear. And the way that I do that, number 1, is you're going to drop the magazine. Now, on this Glock and on most pistols, there's a magazine release button that's usually in this area, and which I'm going to do. This one isn't an ambi one. It's not on both sides. It's made for right-handers. So I'm going to push that button with my right thumb, and it's going to release this magazine. And here you can see in this mag, we've got some dummy rounds. So I can see, oh, this gun had definitely had some ammo in the mag. It's not just totally clear. So that's step 1. But then step 2 is I have to make sure that there's no round in the chamber. And the way I do that is I run the slide back, and here we ejected another dummy round. So now I know, and I can double and triple check it. Now I know, okay, I've ejected everything out of there, and I'm gonna pull this slide back, and I'm gonna engage the slide lock. So I'm gonna pull that back and engage the slide lock. And now I can look in there and see, and I can say, oh, okay, I can look in here, there's no magazine, I can see that visually. I can look inside the chamber, and I can see with my eyes that there's no round in there, but just for a double check, I'm gonna reach with my finger and feel in there and feel, yes, it's absolutely clear, and now I know this pistol is cleared and safe. Now, there are some mistakes that can be made. So number 1, and I've seen this happen, which is, can sometimes people have even lost their lives because of this. Let's say I inject a mag, I've got these dummy rounds, and I'm gonna let the slide go forward, That's going to put one of those rounds right here in the chamber. Now, some people inadvertently, they will say, oh, I'm going to make sure it's clear. So I'm going to rack the slide to get it out of the chamber, and then I'm going to drop my mag. But when I racked the slide and it came back forward, it automatically put another round right up in the chamber. So that is not the way to clear this. And I've seen people pull the trigger, and then of course you're going to fire a live round. You've got a round in the chamber. So you never rack and then drop the mag. You always drop the mag first, and then you rack it to get anything out of the slide. So right now there's a dummy round in here, so I'm going to rack that out and just double, triple check it. I'm going to go ahead and engage that slide lock where I can now look, inspect visually and physically, and now I know 100% for sure that this gun is cleared and it's safe. One thing you may be asking is, when I have racked this slide back, why do I go ahead and do a visual inspection and a physical inspection to make sure that that round has been cleared out of the chamber? Because, you know, if you go ahead and rack it and there's a round in there, it's going to get ejected, right? And the answer is, yeah, 99% of the time or more, that's absolutely going to get ejected. But there is an extractor built into your pistol, and if it has a problem or is damaged, it's possible that when the slide goes back, it will not extract that round. And so we always do it twice to be 100% sure, and then we always visually inspect to be 100% sure that yes, anything that was in that chamber has been ejected, and now it's safe. All right, so let's review that clearing procedure one more time. Step number 1, we drop the mag. Step number 2, we rack the slide back. I'm gonna do it a couple times just to be sure, and I'm gonna visually and physically inspect it. Now I know it's safe. Always remember, drop the mag first, then rack the slide. It's never the opposite. Never rack and then drop. You're always gonna still have one potentially in the chamber. So now that we've covered how to be safe with the gun, we can get to the fun stuff, which is how to shoot. And fortunately, shooting is incredibly simple. Once you've lined up your sights on your target, if you can pull that trigger without disturbing your sights, you're gonna hit your target. Doesn't get much more simple than that. So to help illustrate, I'm gonna change my lighting here a little bit so you can see. Got my pistol with the little laser bore sighter in it. And I'm gonna aim here. Hopefully this laser is showing up. So let's say my target is here and I've lined up, and then I pull the trigger. Now if I'm able to do that and not disturb the muzzle, I'm gonna hit exactly where I'm aiming. Now, if I'm not able to do that, and I'm here and I go, and I pull the trigger, I'm gonna hit low. But as long as I'm able to get a good grip, hold this nice and steady, and pull the trigger without disturbing my sights, I'm gonna hit what I'm aiming at every single time. Now you might be saying, but what about the recoil of the gun, right? Like once that striker hits that primer, it ignites that gunpowder, the force of that, it's gonna launch the bullet down the barrel, but it's also gonna create a force going backwards, blowing that slide back, and you're gonna see some rise of the muzzle of that gun. Well, the good news is that that bullet is gonna exit the barrel before it even starts to lift. So as long as you're aligned on your sights and you can pull that trigger without disturbing that muzzle, you're gonna hit what you're aiming at. So since all we have to do is pull the trigger without moving the sights, well then the million-dollar question becomes, how do we do that? You get good at the fundamentals, and there are 4 fundamentals to shooting. That's your stance, your grip, aligning your sights, and then your trigger pull, or some people call it a trigger press. And for your stance, you want a good athletic stance, a little bit like a boxing stance, where for your strong hand is gonna be a little bit back, and your support hand is gonna be a little bit forward. Now, you've probably heard of an isosceles stance, where we're just standing with our legs shoulder to shoulder underneath our shoulders, nice straight forward. We take our pistol and we come forward out, and we kind of make an isosceles triangle. If you were to look at it from the top down, my shoulders down to my grip to the pistol makes a triangle. Now, if we were to shoot just like this, if we were to do that and to shoot like this, the recoil would start to knock us backwards. That's why we're gonna modify it just a little bit to a little bit more of that athletic stance with, I'm gonna have if I'm right-handed, I'm gonna have my left leg a little bit forward. If I'm a lefty, I'm gonna have my right leg a little bit forward. And so for me, I'm right-handed, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna have it here like that, and then I can come in forward, and as I pull that trigger and I'm fighting that recoil, I can be leaning forward a little bit, my weight on that forward leg, and I'm not getting knocked backwards by the recoil. I'm able to be nice here and have control of that. But a nice athletic stance, not, you know, super bladed, but just a little bit forward to where you can get a natural point of aim and where you can get in there and fight that recoil with your weight forward. One other quick thing about your stance, you know, you're comfortable, your weight's a little bit forward. Now me, I don't like to have my elbows locked all the way out. I like to have them a little bit in, and that gives me a little bit stronger grip and lets my arms absorb some of the recoil. When I'm locked out here, it's harder to get a real solid grip where I'm here and a little bit more relaxed. I just like that. And if I want to, I can kind of crank my shoulders up and my elbows up a little bit, and that puts even more pressure on the grip. So if I'm gonna be shooting super fast, sometimes I'll do that, where I can just really rock and roll and hold that pistol really tight in a vice grip. So when shooting a pistol, one of the things we want our grip to do is it's almost like we're gonna lock this pistol into a vice. So we're gonna try to control that recoil as much as possible, while at the same time having enough dexterity with our trigger finger to get a nice, smooth trigger pull. And one of the ways we're gonna do that is with whatever your strong side is, and that's if you're right-handed, that's your right hand. If you're left-handed, it's your left hand. But with your strong side, you're gonna wanna put the web of your hand right here as far up here on the, they call this a tang or a beaver tail of the pistol. Maybe you can see it against the white background here, this kind of beaver tail. I wanna take that web of my hand and place it as high up on there as I can. And what that's gonna do with my strong side hand is give me as much recoil control as possible. When the powder is igniting and the bullet's coming out this side of the chamber, it's exerting the force back with the slide this way. And so the lower I grip, the more muzzle rise is gonna be. But the higher I get up here and the better I grip, the more I can control that and the less muzzle rise I'm gonna have. So we always wanna get as high tang of a grip as we can with this right hand. And now as we've got that, what I wanna do with my support hand, and I'll flip this around so you can see it on this side, I've got my strong hand here. So I've got a good solid grip, and you can see there's a little bit of space here on this handle of the pistol that's open. And what I want to do is I want to take this part of my hand at the very base here of my hand, and this kind of solid part. And what I want to do is I want to make some space. So I'm going to lift up this thumb a little bit and let my support hand come and marry in right there. And then what I like to do is get even a little bit more aggressive grip. And so instead of just sitting here, I'm gonna kind of rotate the support hand forward a little bit. And you can see that my left hand thumb is up here and got a really solid, I've got most of my support hand is crushing on this grip where I can really get it now. And then my right thumb is also pointed forward. And so my thumbs, they're both pointed forward. We call this a thumbs forward grip, or some people might call it a combat grip. And this is typically how you're gonna grip a semi-auto, which is different than how you would grip a revolver. So speaking of a revolver, if you're used to shooting a revolver, you may sometimes have your strong hand like this, and you might cross the thumb of your support hand over like this, if you can see it here. You never ever wanna do that with a semi-auto pistol, because as this slide comes back, it's gonna take a chunk of your flesh out of your support hand. So never have those two, the thumb crossed over. We always want the thumbs forward grip, where we're just like this. I'll turn to the side so you can see both thumbs are forward. And the thumbs themselves really aren't doing much to our grip. It's really that we're creating a vice as we interlock these digits of our support hand, go right along and in between the ridges of each of these fingers and knuckles of our strong hand. So as those come in there and we get nice good pressure here, we're able to create a really powerful grip, kind of like a vice, where we're controlling this gun and controlling the recoil that comes from it. As a new shooter, one of the things I wondered was, well, how hard should I grip this guy? And should I grip it just as hard with my right hand as my left hand? And it's gonna depend on person to person, and you'll see some different people out there who are fantastic shooters, and they might do it one way and somebody else does another way, and they're also a fantastic shooter. So, try what works for you. But what works the best for me is I want to grip strong enough with my strong hand that I've got a good solid grip, but not so hard that I can't get a nice smooth trigger pull or trigger press. If I'm going too hard and gripping really tight, there's usually kind of a compensatory deal where when you're squeezing hard with the muscles on these lower fingers, you also tend to squeeze hard and you might kind of jerk or yank the trigger with your top finger. So I don't want to do that. So I don't grip with 100% strength with the support hand. I just get a nice solid grip, enough where I can still get a smooth trigger pull and really control that trigger pull. Where I do squeeze about almost 100% is with my support hand. And so once I get that support hand in there and I build that grip, now that support hand is going to squeeze. And I don't want to squeeze so hard that I'm shaking. If I'm doing that, I want to back off a little bit. But otherwise, I want to really grip hard with this support left hand. And then just, still squeeze pretty well with my right hand, but to have enough dexterity where I'm not squeezing 100% so I can get a nice smooth trigger pull with my strong hand finger. So I found that to be very helpful for me is that, I get a good high-tang grip with my strong side hand and a good solid grip in there. I open up my thumb here to create a little space and I get my support hand on there nice and firm. And then if I've got a really good grip with my support hand, I can pull and get a nice smooth trigger pull with my strong side hand and not really disturb the sights or move it too much. Now, if I've got a really loose grip with my support hand and I start trying to shoot fast, I'm going to start yanking it. You can probably see as we're here, we're yanking that kind of slow. But if I've got a really good grip with that left hand support hand, now I can start to shoot a little faster and I'm not really disturbing the sights hardly at all. Now, the real answer is you want to get good trigger control, but I'll tell you what, a really hard, good, strong grip with your support hand can cover a multitude of sins sometimes in shooting and can really help you increase your accuracy as you're learning to shoot. So if your pistol has iron sights that are just made out of iron with your single front sight post and your two rear sight set up to have a notch in the middle, what you want to do is once you pick your target, you're going to overlay that front sight right over the middle of your target. And once that's done, you're going to then align your rear sights with that front sight still over the target. And where you want your visual focus for your eyes is you want to have that front sight in focus, where all that's overlaid over your target. And when you do that, and your front sight's there and your rear sights are aligned, now that means that the barrel of your gun is pointed at your target. Now, as you're doing that, you're going to want horizontally and vertically to have your front sight aligned with your rear sights. And sometimes we call that equal height and equal light. So in the vertical alignment, we want the height of that front sight to be set right, same with the height of those rear sights. That's going to get you lined up, kind of like the tilt in your vertical axis. And then for equal light, if we put that front sight right in between the rear sight, where there's equal space between the front sight and the right part of the rear sight and equal space with the front sight and the left part of the rear sight, that's called equal light in between that front sight. Now we know that we're aligned horizontally. So we get the equal height, the equal light, and we know we're good to go. If your pistol has a red dot optic, or maybe it's green, but an optic on it, what you're able to do there is instead of focusing on the front side of your pistol, you're actually able to maintain your focus completely on your target. And as you're there, you just overlay that red dot over your target. And you never have to pull your focus back to your front sight or to your red dot. You always just stay target focused and align that dot right over your target. And so that's a really nice thing. I know for me, as I've gotten older, a couple years ago, I had no problem where if I pointed out my iron sight, I could focus on that front dot. But now my eyesight, as it gets worse, it's kind of hard to really get everything in focus on that front sight. It's just hard to pull focus there. So I really appreciate that about the red dot. But the other thing is that depending on how far away your target is, that front iron sight could take up most of that target, making it very hard to be super accurate for longer shots. Whereas with your red dot, it's not as big as that front sight, and you can see exactly where it is on your target, allowing you to be more accurate, which is super helpful, especially at longer range. Another thing that I like for the red dot as compared to iron sights is with iron sights, if I'm overlaying that on a target, and let's say that target is a bad person who might be reaching for a weapon. If I'm aiming center mass on that person, the whole barrel and top slide of my gun is obscuring seeing what's happening. If I'm aiming center mass, then I can't really see what's happening down here. So I can't see if they're reaching for a weapon because the top part of the slide of the gun is obscuring that part where I can't really see. Whereas with my red dot, there's some offset. So if I've got that there, now I can actually, I've got a little bit in my window, I can kind of see what's going on below that center mass area, which is a benefit. So another thing about the red dot that can be helpful is that we don't have to align a front and a rear sight because it's kind of holographic and out there in 3D space. As long as we are pointing that dot overlaying our target, I don't have to align it with anything. So if I've practiced and I've gotten good at my presentations, where once I've got my draw and I can present out and I'm on target, it's pretty quick where I never have to change focus. I just look at my target, overlay dot, bang, and I can go. So it can get pretty fast and pretty nice with a red dot. So I love my red dot. I love that I can stay target focused, that it helps my accuracy at distance, that it's pretty fast and I can see more of what's happening. So those are all great things. But another thing I really like about it is that the dot is of course visible at night. So if you're in a low light situation, that dot is still super visible. But there are several cons. So for one thing, iron sights don't need batteries and they never go bad. I mean, you might get knocked off the gun or something if you're slamming it against something, but they're always on. And however, I've got to replace the battery in my red dot about once a year. So usually on my birthday, I just put a new battery in there and I'm good to go. But that is something you want to be aware of. The other thing is that there's glass, there's breakable parts in your red dot. So the glass could get broken, can get shattered, something can happen and your red dot could stop to function. So for certain pistols, you're actually able to align, to co-witness your red dot with your sights, which can be a nice backup where in case your red dot goes down, you can still just see your sights right through your window and get accurate hits. For me, actually, I think the biggest drawback of the red dot is that, I started with iron sights and I got pretty used to, okay, I can draw, I can present, and I can find my sights pretty quick and then get aligned on target and be good to go. But as I switched to my red dot, sometimes I would come out from my holster, present out, and not see any dot whatsoever and be like, and then you gotta hunt for it. Oh, there it is. And now I can shoot. And so that's a big learning curve when you transition, is to be getting good enough that you're able to present out and then you're right on target and you can see that dot, or at least it's somewhere in the window and you're close. Okay, I got it. Now I can align. But if you just shoot out there and there's no dot and you're like, oh, where is it? Oh, that's an awful feeling. It can slow you down. So there is a big learning curve where you can just, dry fire, present. Cool. Oh, there's the dot. Oh, I'm getting my presentation working on that. Okay, there it is. And now I see the dot pretty much every single time, which is great. It's fast. But there is a learning curve there that you'll have to take into account if you're just used to shooting irons. It will take you some time and some practice to get good, nice, reliable presentation. I mean, if you've already got a perfect one from irons, that's fantastic. It won't take you long at all. But for me, it took me a learning curve to get good at presenting and knowing that I've got that dot every time I'm presenting out. So another thing to consider, as you can tell here as I compare this Airsoft Glock 19 that does not have a red dot on it, and then I've got my real Glock that does have a red dot on it, it changes the profile of the gun. And it does make it a little bit harder to conceal. So as you can see, with no red dot on this guy, there's nothing sticking up that might pop out more of your shirt when you're concealing it. Whereas when I have this guy, there is a little more from my red dot optic that comes up about 1 inch. It makes it a little bit harder to conceal. So when I put that in there, there's a little more of a window that can stick out. I don't know if you can see this sideways, that can stick out here if I pull this. You don't have as much of that with your iron sights. So if I plug that in here, yeah, the slide still sticks out, but there's less coming out, here that it's not a lot, it's not a huge difference, but it is a little bit of a difference. So if you have a hard time concealing, that's something to take into account as well. One other thing that's a difference between using your irons and your red dot is with your irons, man, your iron sight is just barely above where that bullet is coming out of the chamber. And so there's not much offset between where you've aligned your sights and where that bullet's going to hit. And so that's a really nice thing. So if you want to hit the target, you aim directly at the target, especially if it's 5 yards, whatever, and you aim center of that target, pull the trigger, you're going to hit center of that target, which is great. However, with your iron sight, depending on how your slide is made to connect with that iron sight, there is going to be a significant offset. And for me, I've got a Generation 3 Glock 19 because I live in California, and that's the only kind you can get. You can't get one of the newer Glocks that has part of the slide cut out for an optic. And so because of that, I had to, if I wanted to run an optic on my Glock, I either had to get the mill sent out and, get the slide sent out somewhere and get it milled, or buy another whole nother slide. But for me, the cheapest option was to buy an adapter. So I've got one here from Outer Impact, and I just removed my rear sight, was able to attach this adapter, and then I could put my optic on top of that. So that's cool, but it does create more offset. So I've probably got more than an inch, like an inch and 1.15 inches probably offset between where my red dot shows up in my optic and where the center of that bullet is coming out the barrel. So I've zeroed my gun and my red dot at about 15 yards, where my point of aim equals my point of impact. Where I can see my dot, that's where the bullet's gonna hit. But anywhere closer, 3-5 yards, I have to aim about an inch above my target if I want the impact to be where I'm aiming. And so that's something you should definitely be aware of that will take some getting used to as well. So even with all those cons, I still love the red dot, and I'm glad that I switched to it. But it does take some time to adapt and get used to it, and all things you should consider when you're considering the difference between a red dot and iron sights. So now that we've got a good stance, a good grip, and we've got our sights aligned on target, the very last fundamental is mastering your trigger pull or your trigger press. And one of the ways that helps us to get good at that is to understand how the trigger works. So on a striker-fired pistol like my Glock 19, initially, as you start to pull that trigger back, there's a little bit of what we call slack, or we can call it trigger take-up. So you can see, and maybe I'll angle this way, you might see a little better. As I start to pull on this trigger, I take it back until I hit what's called the wall. So once we've hit the wall with our trigger, we're going to have to apply more pressure to get the trigger bar to move down the connector and compress that striker spring and get it ready to fire. So this additional pressure we're going to have to put sometimes is called trigger creep. And on a good trigger, it doesn't take a whole lot more pressure. Once you hit the wall, you just give it a little more, and it's nice and smooth and just crisp. A poor trigger, it'll be gritty and uneven, where you can't just apply the same amount of pressure that's smooth. You have to give it a little extra and hard, and it's gritty, and that's not a good trigger pull. But that's the difference between a good trigger and a not so good trigger. But eventually, as you continue to apply pressure, you'll move that trigger bar far enough down the connector to release the firing pin. And this is called the trigger break. A good trigger has a nice, clean break. And once we've pulled it and we get the trigger break, the firing pin will then travel forward, striking the primer of the bullet, causing the gunpowder to ignite and firing the bullet. Now then, after we've pulled the trigger and we've had our break, the trigger might continue to move a little bit to the rear towards the base of the firearm until it stops, and that's called over travel. Now, once we've had the trigger break and we've released the firing pin, it's ignited the gunpowder and the bullet moves out of the barrel, the recoil from those forces will force the slide back. And then the recoil spring will go ahead and send it back forward. And at this point, if we release pressure from our trigger, it'll go until it clicks and we'll hear a reset. And at that point, we're right back at the wall of that trigger, where instead of having to let all the slack out and having to take it slack up again, once we fired and it's cycled, we can just let out till it resets, and then you can fire again. So now that we know a little bit more about how the trigger works, how can we use that to our advantage? Well, for one thing, if I'm trying to make a very accurate shot, I don't have to start from where the trigger is completely, I have to pull it if I just go 0 to 100. If I do that pretty hard, I can kind of force the gun down. So instead, what I can do, instead of having to do the full trigger press, I can go ahead and start to take the slack out of the trigger and get right to the wall. And then I can just apply a little more pressure until the trigger breaks. And when I do it that way, where I'm able to take out the slack and then slowly add a little pressure, boom, and then it breaks, usually I'm able to be much more accurate than if I were to just try to yank it and go through that whole entire process. So again, the name of the game is being able to get your sights aligned on target and then get a nice smooth press of that trigger without disturbing your sights. And so let's compare that, where if I just start from the beginning and pull the trigger hard. Let's see what happens to where my laser is, my laser pointer here, compared to if I take the slack out first and apply a nice, slow, even pressure. So if I'm here and I get excited and I go, oh shoot, you can see exactly what happened. I moved my sight. I moved the muzzle of the barrel. However, if I do the same thing, but I come out and now I take out the slack and apply nice, smooth pressure, much less movement of my muzzle. So as you're learning with your pistol, you can make sure it's 100% clear. Maybe you have a barrel blocker like this as you do your dry fire, but you can get lots of good dry fire practice where, okay, I'm working on my stance, I'm working on my grip, I'm getting my sights aligned and trying to get a nice smooth trigger pull or trigger press. And that doesn't cost you a thing. You can do it over and over until you're really good and comfortable and have good fundamentals at it. And then you can go to the range and do live fire to kind of confirm or test the work that you've been doing with dry fire. And I should also mention one thing that can really affect your trigger pull or your trigger press is which part of your finger that you're placing on that trigger. So ideally, you would want to have not the tip of your finger or not, at the joint where it's pulling, but right in the center part, kind of I call this your finger pad. And you want maybe like the center of your finger pad to be placed right along that trigger. So you can see here, I'm taking my finger and I'm putting the very center part. Let's see, is the best way to see that. I want to put that center part of my finger on that trigger. And that can help me get a nice smooth trigger pull straight to the rear. If I instead put the tip of my finger on it, sometimes I can push the gun to the side. I'll let you see as we're pointing right here. If I get the tip and I push, I can kind of yank it this way. Now, if I go in super deep to the joint, sometimes I can do the opposite. And I can, as I do my trigger pull, instead of pulling it to the rear, I can yank it to the right. So we don't want to do that. So ideally, a lot of modern firearms, they have interchangeable back straps on the back of the pistol so that wherever you grip it, just automatically where your finger's going to fall is going to be right about in the center of your finger pad. That helps you pull straight to the rear. My Glock Gen 3, Glock 19 Gen 3 does not have that. So typically if I really reach in, I'm getting more of the joint in there that can pull my shots to the right. So I have to be very conscious if I'm doing long range shooting or I want to be super accurate to go ahead and consciously, I have to kind of bend this finger a little bit, as you can see, to get it to go on there on the finger pad. And that'd be cool if we weren't under California's really fun handgun roster that's really unconstitutional, where if I could get a pistol where I can adjust the size of this back strap so that when I place my finger on the trigger, it's naturally going to land right in the middle of the finger pad, would be a good deal. But anyway, just be conscious of that. If you place your finger, place it right in the center of that finger pad as you're learning, or whatever works the best for you, that helps you pull that trigger nice and straight to the rear without disturbing the sights left or right.